I'm John Convertino, drummer of Calexico.
And I'm Joey Burns, the guitarist and vocalist of Calexico.
And you have just finished a new record, Algiers?
That's right here in Algiers, Louisiana.
And I'm assuming that's the reason for the name?
Yeah, that is the reason for the name, yeah. There was an instrumental song that we wrote during the session here in December, and we're looking for a title and just looking around the room, looking outside the window, and we just call it Algiers, you know. And so it just kind of stuck there for a while. A lot of the working titles just kind of stuck. And, you know, when it came time to, what are we going to call this record? You know, John just kind of threw out the idea of, let's just call it Algiers. And we liked the one-word title for a change in our history of album titles. And also kind of just, you know, going back to that sense of place. It resonates with who we are, what we've done, and what we do. It seemed to make sense.
What inspired you to record an album in Algiers?
Well, I think both Joey and I needed a break from Tucson. It was the last record we did. We recorded it all in Tucson, and then we mixed it in Austin, Texas. And we found that when we got to Austin to mix with Craig, there was a level of focus there that was nice, that we didn't quite have in Tucson, being in our hometown and families and a lot of distractions there. So it was great to have that kind of focus when we were actually doing the basic tracks here in Algiers.
Do you feel
we went from, you know, are we working on a record and we kind of have some songs and we kind of have some ideas to like just suddenly just exploding? I mean, just the amount of, you know, output you guys had was incredible. You know, John was super stoked to be here. He loved the sound of the room, the Gretsch drums, the way, you know, for him as a drummer, he walked in, he was in heaven. You know, the way that,
Literally.
yeah, I mean, all the great drums that are here, and then the way it's all set up and organized, and two guys that are just as dorked out as he is about vintage stuff, and, you know, putting, you know, and we didn't just settle for, okay, here's our setup and we'll go. You know, we changed the drum setup like 3 times. We mic'd it differently. We approached songs differently. You were on piano instead of guitar on a bunch of songs, and it's just a whole different, like, getting out of our comfort zone and approaching it differently. And it was a good thing to do. And it wasn't so much about, we're going to go down to New Orleans and go get a bunch of New Orleans musicians and make a record that sounds like we went to New Orleans. It wasn't about that. It was about getting out of Tucson to do something different and immersing ourselves in another city that had a musical heritage and a culture that we could let that energy sort of get into our project.
You pick up on a vibe. It's palpable. As soon as you get here, it's like something is moving here. There's a spirit here. There's a, sorry for the cliche word, but it's a vibe. And when you go to Tucson, a lot of people you talk to that aren't from there, who just pass through, are always like, oh yeah, Tucson. I kind of passed through there once and it was interesting, or I felt something there, or, you know, or what's going on down there. And I think we picked up on that here as well, and it immediately started manifesting in songs and rhythms, like on the song Para. The beat to me kind of felt like it came from somewhere else. It didn't come from me. As I was playing it, I was like, how am I doing this? You know, and listening to the first playback, I was like, I'm not sure how I played that. I mean, it's not that difficult of a beat, but it's just kind of different for something different than I would normally play. And so those kind of things are huge landmarks, you know, that say there's a vibe or a spirit here that's trying to make its way out through us musicians.
There's the studio world, and then there's the live world. And it would be great to come back here to do some of these songs and invite more musicians. I mean, another dream would be to do a more bigger band arrangement. You know, have a lot of trombones or a lot of horns and reeds, to have more fun with that, because those things are appealing to us as well. But I think for this record and this time, we wanted to kind of just focus on more of a core lineup and not get too not to get too filled out with arrangements, and yet we were still writing in the process. So for a lot of artists, we kind of work in a more abstract and maybe a backwards way, but eventually we wind up at the same point where it all comes together.
I think the division of labor kind of leans more towards this guy over here. He's, you know, when you walk in the studio and you, the work part is the, you know, coming up with something out of nothing. You know, there's no notes being played here. It's up to us to start playing the notes.
Mm-hmm.
And Joey has a lot of ideas, and if you put me in the studio, it's going to take me a long time to start coming up with notes. It just is. It's just the way I work. I work better off of someone starting and then I respond.
Me too. So I think, you know, and I think that's the beauty of our, you know, dynamic of working as a rhythm section or as a writing team. You know, we bounce ideas off each other.
Yeah, it's all dialogue. It really is. You start with a word and you respond to that word. It just keeps going back and forth, and I know for me at some point I just have to just stop and let other things happen. Just allow them to happen, because if I keep pushing for my idea, it's gonna squish it, you know. So there's that line you have to walk where just sit for a little bit and see what this guy comes up with, or that guy that's sitting over there that's been sitting for a long time.
Mm.
You know, he might come up with something.
And that guy might be in the back of your head.
Yeah,
you know, and I think
true.
that there is the depth of characters, of a whole slew of signature sounds and ideas that we've been able to keep going and juggling, you know, over the years. You know, it's not like every song is kind of similar. There's a lot of different styles within our music, and of course we play a lot of different instruments too, so we kind of mix it up that way. In the old days we would just say, okay, let's try to record us at the same time, and then you play a part, I'll engineer, and then we'll swap places and just keep going until you run out of tracks. That's how it began, and that's a lot of fun to do. Then it's kind of, you know, more like a routine or something. It's fun that way too. But on this record too, I wanted to get some help on the lyrics, and John was willing and came up with some beautiful lyrics for songs like Solstice of a Vanishing Mind and Para. And they're fantastic lyrics, and so that was a lot of fun to kind of open the door and say, hey, you know, I need some help, what do you got? And he came up with some great lines.
It's kind of been the process of songwriting in this band, where the songs come first and then the lyrics. That is a real typical question that's always asked, is do the lyrics come first or the song? And with us, a lot of times it's the music first, and then it starts to influence what the lyrics are going to be, because the music is the chords or the rhythms or the melodies are conjuring up images. So you start to write the lyrics that.
One of my favorite songs that I've been really enjoying on this record that we kind of mentioned earlier is Sinner, or Sinner in the Sea. Just the fact that I can make a musical bridge between New Orleans and Havana, and having been to both cities and loving both, you know, music scenes for many years, means a lot to me. And I think you know, it's a great live performance, and I think having played it now just one time in Tucson a couple months ago live, I think it's gonna be a great song to take on tour and see where it's gonna go.
I always feel like musicians are a certain kind of antenna, that we pick up on things that we're not even aware of sometimes consciously. Mm-hmm. And it comes out subconsciously through the music. And Joey was talking a little earlier about the tragedy that happened in Tucson, and I mean, there's tragedies all over the world that happen, and it always seems like art or music or filmmakers or some form of art goes to that tragedy, and there's healing that happens as soon as it happens. As soon as the musicians get there, as soon as the filmmakers get there, this healing starts to happen. I always feel like that's a part of our job as musicians is to get down there where things are hurting, and so I think that's playing out a lot in this record, and maybe that's why there's some darkness there, but you know, it's a healing process too.
I don't think I could do the mixing and do the work that I do if we weren't aligned. I think both somewhat spiritually, I guess I should say, having the same caring about, people, and, the same passion about, that the border and immigration and the demonizing of people and, just calling them immigrants and, they're illegals and all this stuff, like they don't exist, and, letting them just die in the desert. And we've been, for better or worse, we've been carrying that flag for years now, saying, this is going on. And I know people can look at something like Calexico and sort of poo-poo us a little bit, like, well, who are these white guys, co-opting this name of this town and doing this sort of, Mexican-infused music. But if you know Tucson and you know us, it makes perfect sense, because we embrace where we live, and we want it to be a great place, and it hurts us that, where we live and where we care about is looked at in a certain way, because somehow, we're this, nexus of all these problems. And I never looked at it as being problems. I always looked at living in Tucson was awesome, because there was this culture. There was people that I didn't feel like there was this separation between me and them. I never ever felt like that there was this somehow like a separation between myself and anybody in the community. And in the last, it seems like, 8 years or so, there's been this wedge that's trying to be driven between us, like us and them. And, whatever we can do to stop that. And I know, and the music just becomes a part of that. So it's important that this record has those themes. It's important that it's dark, because it's a dark time, and the only way we come to the light is sometimes to recognize what's wrong and what we can do to change it.
But we had a name for the band, and it was Spoke. And that's the name of our first record, and we thought, let's just live with this as the name of the band, Spoke. And it turns out there was another band already called that. So we had to come up with something else. And right about that time, there was this thing happening with our music that we weren't really, we weren't really in control of it. It was just happening. And it kind of had this feel and sound of where we were living, which was Tucson. And we pretty much recently moved there. We'd only been there for a few years, and this sound started coming out. And I think, again, that's just testament to where you write what you see, you play what you feel, and that was happening there. There was mariachi music, there was trumpets, there was jazz happening, and that's what started coming out. And we were making trips to San Diego and passing through Calexico, the town, and liked the hybrid of the two words, California and Mexico, and liked that it was a combination, and that's what we were doing with our music. So that stuck.